In 2001, Harry Potter was more than just a popular fantasy series with a devoted fan base. It was a cultural phenomenon, and everyone, even those who never read the books or had never shown interest in fantasy, were curious to see what Rowling's magic was all about. Curious is the key word here because that's what the first film in the Potter series amounts to. A curiosity. As has been said on countless occasions, The Sorcerer's Stone is not a film so much as a precisely staged representation of the book that just so happens to be shot with a camera. It's not just about being overly faithful, however. Whatever anyone says, the Potter films are all more or less equally faithful to their novels, and can all function as spark notes for Rowling's series. Yet while later films in the series are engaging, Sorcerer's Stone now appears outdated, obsolete, stilted, and flat-out boring. Such is the case for three reasons. 1. The way Columbus approaches the material lacks not only soul, but at times directorial competence. 2. Its placement as the opening chapter of a 7-part series is inherently flawed, the blame for which can only be laid upon Rowling. And 3. Daniel Radcliffe has not yet found a strong enough acting ability to command any degree of the viewer's attention. His job in this story is to look amazed and bewildered at everything, and even at that he doesn't do a great job. His character does not develop a real personality until the second film. Ron and Hermione, however, are fully realized to the largest extent that could have been expected. So is McGonagall among the adults, but Snape and Dumbledore will take a little longer to fully develop their now famous personas. The acting is fine overall, so let us examine the problem with Columbus. Columbus's style as a director is defined by glossiness and objectivity. By this I mean that his camera never makes any attempt to become truly involved in the proceedings. You don't need handheld to immerse the viewer as Paul Greengrass would have you believe, but you do need a well-thought-out shot selection that reflects the material you're presenting. Both framing and movement must be taken into account. On the framing end, Columbus is undeniably uneven. At times he seems more inclined to just point the camera at his subjects rather than consciously frame them. Close-ups are often far too close up, in a way that seems amateurish. The way he shoots Hagrid is especially glaring. He fills the entire shot with Hagrid's face, leaving a little space on either side of the frame, or sometimes none at all. It may sound logical when you describe it, but somehow it looks kind of awkward and sloppy. There's nothing inherently wrong with his camera's movement, but there's never anything especially interesting about it. It never really calls attention to itself, and therefore it's not very engaging. Columbus's worst problem, however, is his sense of pacing. Admittedly, it may not be entirely his fault, as he was under such strict constraints to make an exact copy of the book this time around. Even so, the first 40 minutes of the film are gruelingly boring. The Dursleys hang around for far too long, and Hagrid takes Harry from one essential stop to another with no sense of when the hell Harry will finally arrive at the damn school. But after 40 minutes he does, and the film begins to pick up temporary steam. The introduction of the castle by boat is certainly exciting, though Columbus gives it a Spielbergian flavor that the series will quickly grow out of in later entries. Right now it feels like we're arriving at Jurassic Park. The Great Hall scene is also fun, and Columbus's 360 around the Sorting Hat is probably the best work he puts out in the entire film. But then classes start, and the boredom sets in. We have a class with McGonagall that's totally unnecessary. Snape's introduction is cool, but the set piece is a little too dark, dingy, and yawn-inducingly hollow. Then we have the mail delivery sequence, which goes on forever.
Mail's head.
Pace picks up a bit with the troll and the first game of Quidditch, but then slows down once again with the ponderous Mirror of Erised sequence. The Dark Forest scene is kind of an unnecessary diversion, but it's alright, as it gives Harry a chance to argue with his nemesis Draco Malfoy.
Did you hear that?
Finally, we get to the trapdoor climax, which seems to have one too many stages. The plants allow Hermione to show off. The chess allows Ron to show off. The final confrontation is, of course, up to Harry. But is the flying keys room really necessary? Hasn't Harry proven himself with a broom enough times for one movie? The sporadic weakness of the film's style must be blamed on Columbus. But the substance of the story itself is flawed in ways that can only be attributed to Rowling. Now, I'll say right out that I have not read the book on which this film is based. I didn't start reading the books until the third entry, and I will admit that the story of Sorcerer's Stone is fine for an introductory novel. But when you have a film that's the first in a series of 8, you need it to pack a little more of a punch than this. You also needed to have a story that's more firmly grounded and a conflict that's a little more threatening. Maybe the sheer magic of a little kid going to a school like Hogwarts is enough for one movie, but when you compare it to all subsequent Potter entries, it just doesn't fit in. The others are all purposeful, with well-defined plots and conflicts that are consistently threatening, for the most part at least. The Chamber of Secrets is opened, students are getting petrified left and right. Sirius Black has escaped from Azkaban prison, Dementors at every entrance. A sadistic lady in pink is using politics to take over the school's administration. A stuttering professor wants to steal a stone that nobody knows or cares about except the main trio of characters. A little too low-key, and not enough of a threat. Harry touching Quirrell to kill him is far too easy, when only one movie later he'll have to stick a sword into a giant snake. Another problem is that the elements of this film are either far too derivative of later films which improve upon those elements, or they include things that feel totally out of place in this series. The prime example is Fluffy, a creature who seems to stand outside the Harry Potter mythology, not fitting in with the creatures who will later be introduced. The overarching story of the Potter series has not yet begun in earnest with this film. I think people who haven't read the books and haven't seen any of the films would watch Sorcerer's Stone today and be too underwhelmed to guarantee a desire to watch the rest of the films. Personally, I think they could start with the second one and not miss a thing. If they do choose to start with the first film, however, I would advise them to remember that it was made at a time when the producers were very much testing the waters and had no definite expectations of making 7 more films. The true magic had barely even begun.